The link that connects us across the world. Across countries, from Egypt to India, Brazil to Botswana, across continents, Europe to Australia, Asia to Africa, across cultures, traditions past, changes to come, modern mom, and native son. It shapes the events and relationships that define our lives, our mind. We'll explore the why behind behavior, why people do the things they do, and find out how to do it better. On today's show, Aristotle called it the whole aim of human existence. It's what everyone wants and what everyone's looking for, but how do we find happiness? We'll talk to the experts about how we can be happier people. We'll look at what research shows are the keys to a happy life on this edition of Behind the Mind. Hello, welcome to Behind the Mind. I'm Marina Colby. Are you happy? We ask that question to people around the world, and most agree there is room for improvement. Our guest is psychiatrist Dr. Daniel Amen. He believes you can lead a happier life if you understand how to make your brain work at its full potential. He has written 19 books, including the New York Times bestseller, Change Your Brain, Change Your Life, which is published in 6 languages. Dr. Amen joins us in a few minutes to field your questions and comments. Call now at 404-525-6888. You can also email your questions to behindthemind@cnn.com or join the chat room by simply going to cnn.com/chat and clicking on Behind the Mind. But first, let's visit his clinic in Newport Beach, California. Imagine a world with more successful people, happier families, and less violence. The technology to make that possible is available, according to neuroscientist Daniel Amen. He says it's even a great way to scrutinize potential love interests.
So it's sort of like in the movie Meet the Parents, where the father gives the potential son-in-law a polygraph. Well, this is much better because you can actually see brain function.
Dr. Amen is one of a handful of psychiatrists who uses a nuclear imaging scan to analyze blood flow in the brain. Dr. Amen has scanned more than 12,000 brains. His research shows the makeup of your brain can significantly impact your behavior. By looking at a brain image, he can see the parts of the brain that work well, too hard, or not hard enough, and then more accurately prescribe an effective treatment. Other types of brain scans just show what the brain looks like. He says that's like trying to figure out what's wrong with a car without checking the engine.
In psychiatry, you go to the doctor and you say, I'm depressed or I have problems with my temper, and the doctor will then give you a diagnosis and some medicine without ever popping the hood.
Dr. Amen uses brain imaging to help everyone from difficult teenagers to people who are having marriage problems.
A lot of people who get divorced have brain problems, and nobody's aware of it. If you go to a marital therapist, you may go to 5 marital therapists, and no one will ever think about brain function. But what we have found is that when your brain works right, you work right.
Dr. Amen analyzes brain activity indicated by the red areas. He scanned my brain and found the red area in the back means I'm coordinated. The smaller red area on the side indicates intuition. This is a scan of someone with too much brain activity. The person is aggressive, moody, and inflexible. Here's my healthy brain compared to the brain of someone who's a heavy drinker. The areas that look like holes are reduced blood flow. That means that part of the brain is not working properly. It only takes a few years of drinking, smoking, or drugs to cause real damage. This is the brain of a teenager who shot 22 people. He has got decreased activity in the left temporal lobe, which studies show is linked to violence. Dr. Amen says diagnosing brain problems early might be a key to reducing violent behavior. He prescribes treatments like medication, counseling, and exercise, because exercise increases blood flow to the brain.
Your brain's very important, and you need to keep it healthy. And when it's abnormal, medicine helps, but your wife helps as well.
If you have a question or comment for Dr. Amen, and call us now at 404-525-6888, or log on to the internet and participate in our live chat room. Just go to cnn.com/chat and click on Behind the Mind. You can also email your questions to behindthemind@cnn.com. Dr. Amen, great to have you here.
Thanks so much.
So, how many people actually have a healthy brain?
Well, probably about half the population have healthy brains. About 20% of the population has what I call super healthy brains, and they tend to be the people who achieve the most in life, because when your brain works right, you work right, and these are people that have sort of finely tuned engines.
So how do you get a healthy brain, or how do you fine-tune your brain to be even better?
Well, there are lots of ways. Certainly, genetic vulnerability matters. If you come from people who are relatively healthy, not much in the way of mental illness or learning problems, your brain's going to be healthier. How you eat matters. People who have nice balanced diets, balance between protein and carbohydrates, that really matters. Too much sugar is bad for your brain. Too much protein is bad for some people's brains. Exercise matters, how you think matters, and who you spend time with matters. All of those things go into making a healthy brain.
What is your definition of happiness?
Well, my definition of happiness is doing what you want, making a difference, and being with people who you who love you back.
We have a call from Spain. I was going to mention a quote, which I'll come back to after, but we have a call from Spain. What's your question?
My question, doctor, is what causes people to lose their memory or to have amnesia?
Well, that's a very interesting question. Memory is housed in a couple of different parts of the brain, but most in the temporal lobes. And so if you have brain trauma, that can cause problems with your memory. If you develop what we know Alzheimer's disease or dementia illnesses, you can have problems with your memory. Decreasing hormone levels, especially in women, as they become perimenopausal or menopausal, can affect memory. Now, amnesia is sort of like you lose your memory all of a sudden, and that can be from a stroke, it can be from head trauma, it can be from a seizure that puts you into a coma. I've actually treated a patient recently who had that problem.
Talking about the quote that was in your book and referring to the thinking part. So let's look at the quote in your book, and it says, if there is any excellence and if there is anything worthy of praise, let your mind dwell on these things. Tell me about the importance of this quote and what part it plays in the thinking process.
Well, that quote actually comes from the Apostle Paul. Most people in this country think that Aaron Beck was the father of cognitive therapy. It's therapy for your thoughts. We know we can actually treat people who are depressed by getting them to change the way they think. You can actually find that in the New Testament and the Bible. How you think matters. Your thoughts affect every single cell in your body. And nobody trains people on a wholesale level how to think in ways that are positive and helpful. It's not pie in the sky sort of thinking, it's rational thinking, but sort of putting a positive twist to it.
In your book you mentioned how, in fact, when you have a negative thought, it sets out brain chemicals. So you explain more about that.
Well, every time you have a thought, your brain releases chemicals. Every time you have a sad thought, a mad thought, an angry thought, a negative thought, your brain releases chemicals that affect all the cells in your body. Immediately, your heart rate goes faster, your hands start to sweat, your muscles get tense, your physiology changes. But what we also know from the brain studies is that your brain changes in a negative way, as well with negative thoughts, but it also changes in a positive way if you're thinking in an optimistic way, in a happy way, in a hopeful way.
How important are your relationships into a person's happiness?
Huge, huge. If you spend time with people who are loving, who see the best in you, you're going to be a happier person. If you spend time around critical people who only notice the negative, things have to be their way or they get very upset, you're going to be more stressed, and that's going to have a negative impact on your brain, because stress chemicals actually go to certain areas of the brain and kill brain cells. It's bad to be under chronic stress.
So what if that person that's so negative happens to be your spouse or your girlfriend or boyfriend?
Well, you want to maybe drag them to the doctor, or change your brain, change your life, because there are lots of exercises in that book that help people sort of have a healthier brain and be happier. But, if it's a chronic problem, you really have to make sure you spend time around other people. Otherwise, that will take literally, I think, years off your life.
Now, in your book, you also talk about the deep limbic system. Could you explain how it's the control center that controls your emotions?
Well, the limbic part of the brain, it's part of actually our older brain, is the emotional bonding center of the brain. It's involved with how positive or negative you are. It's involved with bonding and connecting with other people. Also has your sense of smell in it. And when it works right, people tend to be happier, more positive, more bonded, more easily connected to other people. When it doesn't work right, people have problems with depression. They tend to be more socially isolated. They tend to be more negative.
Now we have a caller from England who has a question for you. Caller.
Hi.
Go ahead with your question.
Yeah, hi. You know that I always get the headache with my mind, and I got that difficulty with the people's in the normal life to dealing with the people's, and I always feel to be cry. What's that mean?
Well, it often can go along with depression. If you feel sad, if you have trouble getting along with people, and if you have a headache, it also might mean you have abnormalities in this part of the brain called the temporal lobes. We frequently see problems with headaches, and certain kinds of medicine can balance that.
Well, we have a question from a man who is in Italy. We had our crews go around the world and asking questions. So we wanted to go to this question from this man in Italy and see if you could give us an answer to that.
Why in today's world do people seem always unsatisfied and always in search of something, but they don't know what?
Well, that's such an interesting question. Especially those people who their lives don't matter to them. And I think part of happiness is doing something that's important to you, whether it's for your kids, at work, for your community. The happiest people, in my experience, are those people who have clear goals and they're doing something that's meaningful.
Terrific. We have to take a break right now, but when we come back, we'll take a look at what studies show about what makes people happy and what doesn't. We'll also continue our discussion with Dr. Daniel Amen. Please stay with us.
When school ends, that's happiness for 14 and 15-year-olds. But for older people, happiness is having a wife or a husband.
Being healthy is the most important thing in your life.
Happiness is being single.
And welcome back. Do you know anyone who's got it all? Well, people who appear to be lucky in life may not be as happy as you might think. Comedians can give you a laugh and momentary happiness, but for many people across the globe looking for a long-term fix, the key to happiness is
Money. Obviously money.
Winning the lottery, 7 million. That surely would make you happier.
research shows money does make people happier, but it has less power than we imagine. Take the United States, where the pursuit of happiness is part of the Declaration of Independence. Recent research shows quality of life, like earning power, has risen since World War II, but the number of people who consider themselves happy remains flat. And people are 10 times more likely to be depressed as those born 2 generations ago. Even if you do win the lottery, studies show years later, you're not likely to be much happier than you were before. Around the world, people say they'd like to spend more time with family. One study finds a whopping 85% of U.S. workers want to spend more time with family. In Great Britain, 74%, Russia, 71%, Italy, 63%, and Japan, 44%. And though more quality time with the ones we love can certainly make us happier, the biggest keys to lasting happiness seem to be high self-esteem and a good relationship with your partner.
One of the most important things is the communication. If you can communicate, then you can work out your problems.
Professor Charles Hill studied a group of college students and followed them over 25 years to find out what made them happy.
In my grandparents' day, people didn't expect much out of marriage. Now we do. We expect to get many needs met in that marriage, and maybe sometimes our expectations are too high.
Hill suggests we can meet some needs by having other relationships with family and friends. Work can also be an important source of self-esteem.
Women who have careers, this creates lots of stress. Trying to juggle family and career and child care is terrible. And yet sometimes these women are more satisfied with their lives because of they have this other identity, this other source of self-esteem.
In a recent study, some economists estimated a happy marriage is worth $100,000 a year. All else being equal, a married person is as happy as a single person who makes $100,000 more. And we have a question from a viewer in Nigeria. David, what's your question for Dr. Amen?
Yes, Marina, thank you for taking my question.
Go ahead.
Dr. Marina, Dr. Amen, I'm trying to ask, if you live in a country where you have so much wars and so much problems, like what you just said now about Philippians 4:19, how can you be happy when you live among people who want to kill you, who are, very hostile to you?
Well, it's a very good question. And what we know is chronic stress, when you're under stress day in and day out, that certainly has a negative impact on brain function. But, the opposite is not true. If you live in a country where there's no war, where things are easy and they come easy, that can almost have its own problems. I think happiness is doing something that you love and having people around you that you love and that love you back. And that can happen anywhere, as we see many of the stories that come out of war-torn places.
Now we have an email from Kentucky, and let's see what that email question is. It asks, if you suspect your brain scan would show abnormalities like a tendency towards alcoholism or Alzheimer's disease, what can you do?
Well, what you want to do is do everything you can to try and fix the problem. If you have a tendency toward alcoholism, don't drink. We know children who grow up in alcoholic families, they have a higher tendency to have problems with drug and alcohol abuse. If you never drink, you'll never have a problem. So I recommend they stay abstinent. If you know that Alzheimer's disease runs in your family, don't have a head injury. Don't do high-risk activities, because we know if you have the gene that makes you vulnerable to Alzheimer's disease and you get a head injury, it doubles your risk. Also, you should be taking vitamin E and vitamin C every single day, because the long-term studies suggest that may be protective. In addition, you want to keep learning, because those people who keep learning new things tend to work their brain, and that may also be protective against something like Alzheimer's disease.
Now we'll go back to the streets of Tokyo and see what our crews in Tokyo had to find out from the people there. This is a question from a woman in Tokyo, and what does she have to ask us?
There are many people who think everyone becomes happy once they're married. I used to think so, but recently I don't believe it anymore.
So how much of a reality is it that you find happiness, especially for women? I mean, we heard it with the younger Italian girl as well, that they think, I found a man, that's it, I've done it all, I found happiness.
Depends on the fit. There's some marriages that fit very nicely and really increases happiness. There are other people that fits a disaster, and you spend, the rest of your life unhappy. So it really depends on the fit, which means before you pick a partner, you want to know them for a while, and you want to really see if it fits for you.
Now, another thing that was mentioned in that story with Dr. Hill, he talks about the importance of self-esteem, and you yourself have written a book, Coaching Yourself to Success. So how do we build self-esteem so that we don't rely solely on our partner to bring happiness into our lives?
Well, it's very important. And how people build self-esteem is they have small successes throughout their lives. So whether it's at work, in school, in sports, whatever it is, you need to have areas of competence in your life. And if you feel not competent in most of those areas, it's important to work on those, whether it's your relationship at work and so on.
We have a call from the United States. Jackie, what's your question for Dr. Amen?
Hi, my question is, I was wondering, are there certain things that people do in other cultures that we may not do in the United States, that different actions or practices that they do that makes them happier, that maybe we're lacking in this country?
Well, probably the most important thing is the issue of extended family. When you're in a smaller country, most of your family is around, and you can get to them in an hour or two. In this country, because it's such a large country, that's a problem. And when we are not staying as connected to our families as they are in other cultures. And there's actually some studies that suggest you have a higher incidence of heart disease if you're not as connected to your family.
We'll get back to that topic after this short break, and when we come back, solutions. We'll talk about the everyday things you can do to have a little more happiness in your life. Please stay with us.
Live happy and feel yourself happy and make others happy. You'll be happy.
Make the most of what you have, and just be thankful for each and every day that you get to live.
And welcome Welcome back to Behind the Mind. We have just a few minutes left, so let's talk solutions. But before that, we're going to go to questions from the Netherlands. Tell us your name and tell us your question.
Yes, hello. My name is Magnus Carlson. I'm wondering, since you say happiness is a healthy brain, how would you define a healthy brain?
Well, what we see in our study is a healthy brain is sort of good, full, even activity. And when you have a head injury, that changes it. When you drink too much alcohol, that changes it. So having a brain that works right, if you will, like having a car engine that's tuned properly, is essential to happiness.
Now, going back to our earlier question from Jackie before we get to solutions, I wanted to mention that you come from a Lebanese background. So tell me how that impacted your role in life.
Well, in a Lebanese family, the husband or the father is sort of the ruler, the king, and the wife does everything for them. At least that's how it was in my family, and that makes men happy. But it can be very stressful. And being an American Lebanese, even though I saw that growing up, I sort of had that expectation in my own marriage, and it didn't sort of work out like that.
So is that a solution for women in marriages? Should they listen and do everything for their husband? Because it just seems to me, from my experiences, that, yes, men like for their women to listen to them.
Well, absolutely. But I think it goes both ways, and that's what we're really trying to do in our country is to get a balance of mutual respect. But rather than waiting for that other person to do for you, if you find you're the kind of person that does for them, you'll be happy often just in the act of doing. It's giving that makes people happy much more than getting.
Now, Aristotle said happiness depends upon ourselves. What is some advice you could give to people to make their lives a little bit happier?
Well, make sure you take care of your brain. People should learn about it and optimize brain function with exercise, the right diet, thinking properly, and also surrounding yourself with people who are positive, optimistic, people who are interesting and curious. All of those things go into making people happy.
Now, we're going to get another question from Tokyo, and let's listen to what this person from Tokyo had to ask.
I've been kind of lazy recently, so it would make me more happy if I could have more motivation, work a bit harder.
So how do people get more motivated to reach their goals so they will be happier?
Well, one, you want to make sure you have a healthy brain. We know people who smoke a lot of marijuana, they have decreased motivation, and it damages brain function. So you want to make sure you're doing the right things to have a healthy brain, and then do it in baby steps. People go, well, I want to be a doctor, but it's like, well, wait a minute. Before you do that, you have to take biology and chemistry. You have to get the prerequisites in life, and it's the journey that makes people happy rather than the end. So start the journey on what it is that's in your heart.
Some research I've read also says that you should focus on the things that make you happy. So how do you get people to focus? Maybe if economically they have a job which they have to do, how do they get to do the things they really like? Maybe they aspire to be something else.
Well, people become unhappy often when they're unbalanced. And what I talk about in Change Your Brain, Change Your Life is very important to look at your relationships, your work, and yourself. Know what your goals are in each area, and then spend some time each day working on those 3 areas.
Dr. Amen, it was such a pleasure having you, but unfortunately, like always, we ran out of time. That's our program for today. If you'd like to continue the discussion with Dr. Daniel Amen, simply log on to the internet and participate in our live chat room for another 30 minutes. Just go to cnn.com/chat and click on Behind the Mind. You can also get a copy of all of Dr. Amen's books at www.brainplace.com. I'm Marina Colby. Thank you for joining us on Behind the Mind.